This is Jordan Edwards, and this is the Business Jiu Jitsu Podcast.
Good afternoon, Ari Goldman.
How's it going?
Very good. Very excited to have you here today. I'm a big fan of yours. For those of you who don't know, Ari is the man behind the Jiu Jitsu Flo Instagram account, a really popular and dynamic and growing Instagram page where you demonstrate fundamental flow techniques and more. And just really been an honor watching it grow. And I love it. And a little bit of a fanboy, but pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate the kind words and the opportunity to chat.
Yeah. So, Ari, where are you from?
So I grew up in Central California in Monterey. It's about 2 hours south of San Francisco. I grew up there. I'm currently living in Costa Mesa, down south in like Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent through high school in Monterey, and then in adulthood traveled around a lot. But for the last few years, since about when COVID started, like 2020, moved down here to Costa Mesa, and that's where I reside nowadays.
Yeah. What was your childhood like growing up? Were you did you play sports?
I did. So yeah, sports has been a big part of my life. I got a couple older brothers. We, baseball, basketball, football. My first 12 years of my life, actually, I was heavily into gymnastics. Kind of random, but that was like a big part of my life. And I middle school, I still played baseball and basketball, but gymnastics was that was my thing growing up. And then I played baseball and basketball through high school, ended up playing basketball in college, and I didn't find jiu-jitsu till I was about 25.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny you say that. One of my best friends, Scott Lorberbaum, shout out Scott. He, we all start gymnastics when you're a little kid, and just only a few of you keep going with it.
Yeah.
It's like there's a very, very small select group of the initial cohort of 3 and 4 year olds just never stop. Yeah. And my best friend went on to play Division I lacrosse, and even until this day, even though he hasn't played sports in well over a decade, he just has a level of athleticism that stems all the way back to him doing that gymnastics. And he stopped doing gymnastics probably in middle school, but when he started to pick up lacrosse, he excelled extremely, extremely quickly. And his physique, even to this day, you can still see it. I mean, it's crazy what that does as a young person. So, yeah. And now it makes a lot of sense as I've watched your page grow and look at all of the techniques that you put on, the benefits of gymnastics.
Yeah, I always figured when I have kids, which I'd like to in the future, that play whatever sport you want, but gymnastics is going to be a foundation. Just because, the mobility, flexibility, strength, coordination that it gives you. And it allowed me to keep up with my friends throughout, middle school and high school that were playing baseball year round, basketball year round. I was doing gymnastics year round, and I'd play these other sports, but I was able to keep up with them. And I think it had a lot to do with the coordination and everything that gymnastics provided. But then finding jiu-jitsu, I was like, shit, man, I might have a competitor where, now obviously I'm all about the, jiu-jitsu, and try to get my family and everybody into it, because it provides a lot of the same core skill sets and values that gymnastics provided me. So, but they go hand in hand.
Absolutely. Well. Absolutely. Yeah, jiu-jitsu is so powerful. I want to get there in a minute, but I just want to learn a little bit more about you. So you grew up there south of San Fran, Central Cali. Is that where you went to college?
So, all right, I'll dive a little more into kind of my journey. So, all right, I ended up graduating from San Francisco State. But my childhood was very structured until I was about 12, and that's gymnastics, go to school, go to gymnastics for like 4 hours a night and repeat. Around middle school, like 12, 13, a lot of things changed. So my parents got divorced. Both my brothers moved out of the house. They were in college, and I quit gymnastics and just really got into the social setting, smoking a lot of weed, hanging out with friends, playing sports, but no real structure. But I was still able to keep things together. And out of high school, I walked on to a basketball team at Chico State. But things they didn't go great. I was kind of a head case, trying to figure things out. So I ended up transferring college a few times. Ended up actually getting caught up in some heavier drugs. I got caught up in the Oxycontin wave. Never really talked about that much, but so I ended up going to rehab in like my early 20s. And when I came out, I went to San Francisco State, and that's where I found jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that you shared that, just because everybody has, so many things, no matter what you see from the outside of what people's lives look like or what you perceive, we're all going through so many hard things personally. And anytime somebody has gotten through it, it helps so many people. And you don't know how many people have reached out to me through this podcast and the platform because there's just some off comment that either I said or one of the guests said, and they're like, I'm going through that, or, I'm losing my business, or I lost my business. Because I've talked about a million failures on this podcast. So I have failed so many times. People don't believe it because I've found a lot of success in business. But, that has come with trying and failing so many times. Yeah. And, whether it's you mentioning that, he hasn't been on the podcast yet. I've spoken to him about it, but Tom DeBlas has spoken about his, so many problems that he had growing up with a really tortured childhood. And he's doing a lot of work for bullying right now. So I guess what I'll say is, anybody out there who is, facing similar issues, jiu-jitsu is a path, is a great path.
It has been for me, right? Like, I try not to be too preachy about it, but it's definitely something that has saved my life and helped me just stay on the right track. When I went back to college and I was completely sober and just clear-headed and humble in life in general, like life just humbled me. I was just entitled growing up, thought everything was going to come easy, and realizing that it wasn't, didn't know what to do about it. So when I went back to college after I was sober for a while, and found jiu-jitsu, it was like the perfect storm, because one of the amazing things about jiu-jitsu, like you hear it all the time, is like it really does humble you every day, right? Or maybe not every day, maybe you go a couple of weeks or a month or whatever, but eventually you're going to get humbled, and you just got to keep showing up, right?
Oh yeah. I just get chills when I think about that, because I got so humbled on Monday night. It was just one of those nights, and I was I'm a brown belt now. Nice. And I was training with a fellow brown belt, who I can't believe is a brown belt, UFC star Randy Brown, longtime teammate of mine. Nice. And we were training back and forth, positional training all night, going back and forth. He's getting ready for a jiu-jitsu fight coming up on Rise. Cool. And he kept slowly turning it up on me, and I was slowly losing energy, and my whole body just cramped, and I'm screaming, tap, 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 and he just doesn't want to let me go. And he basically was like, you had more in the tank. You had more in the tank. And I was just dead. And I was screaming like a white belt. I was like, tap, tap. No, please let me go. And I was squealing, and I was so embarrassed afterwards. But that's the stuff that happens. And I'm just, he called me later that night, and he's like, dude, I'm so sorry. I'm training for a fight, and I don't. And I was like, those are the moments, and only in retrospect can you be grateful for.
100%. Yeah, it's so true. And whether you know, it's someone at your level or a higher level or lower level that exposes something that you're doing wrong. Even if it's like, oh yeah, I know that technique, I know that escape. Well, you didn't know it right there. So like obviously something wasn't clicking, you weren't fully focused, you're getting a little lazy or something's going on. Like every night you got to be on your game, you know? And I feel like that's how it is in life, right? You could put a year or two, you know, whatever amount of time together where you have a good daily routine. And then the next day you wake up and you're like, I just don't feel like doing anything and I'm going to be lazy. And you feed into that and it just starts to compile. And, you know, you got to stay in the moment.
Those days, whenever I'm on a streak, I've been on a streak and I just like try to surrender. And I say to myself, like, I'll be lifting or I'll be doing jiu-jitsu. And I'll just like, thank God that you gave me the strength to just get here and just keep this going. It's like, it's just like out of my hands at some point. I'll do the work, but I'm just so grateful when I could hit those streaks. Yeah. And to your point, like get so down on myself when for some reason, you know, I just wasn't able to get to training or I wasn't able to get to the gym, business trip, jet lag, just some bullshit reason. Yeah. And it's again, another humbling. So how'd you get into jiu-jitsu? Like how'd you find out about it the first time?
So, you know, I think so always super competitive, right? Sports, like again, playing basketball throughout college. I was at San Francisco State, ended up running out of eligibility and needed to find something to do. I'd watched, you know, obviously was watching the UFC. And I remember I walked into Ralph Gracie's gym headquarters in downtown San Francisco where Code Osiander is teaching. Mm-hmm. I walked to his gym and was like, hey man, I want to learn how to fight. And, you know, like not knowing anything. And he was like, yeah, cool. Go over to this class, like into the corner. And he taught me how to do a hip escape. He's like, here, go shrimp. And I hip escape for like an hour and a half, just going back and forth. And I was like, well, this is cool. And that there's something about jiu-jitsu, the movements, I don't know exactly what it was, but I ended up, because I was at San Francisco State, it's kind of like the outer part of San Francisco. So House Gym wasn't the closest or easiest. So I ended up training at another smaller gym nearby where I lived. And it was a black belt of Half and Kurt, a guy named Jimmy Harkeen. He was an MMA fighter, like really good jiu-jitsu guy. And that's where I started training. And I fell in love. Like he was a no bullshit guy, taught me like the mentality of fighting and training. And so yeah, from there, it didn't take long for me to realize like this is something, you know, I need to have in my life forever. I obviously want to compete, but the larger goal is how can I make sure that I'm doing this consistently forever.
Yeah. Were you working at that time you were in school during that time or you were just out of school?
No, I was in school and I was working a little bit as well, but I was mainly in school. So I would do my classes and I would go train every day and I loved it. And yeah, I got my blue belt from Jimmy and I graduated college and then I moved down south to LA. And my jiu-jitsu journey is a little out of the ordinary as well, because I got a different belt, or I got promoted from a different instructor for every belt.
Wow.
And I think it's just because my journey, just trying to figure out life. And I move around a lot, you know, just trying to explore different careers. So ended up going from San Francisco to LA for a new job. And I ended up training with Chrome Gracie. And that's where I got my purple belt.
Sure.
Loved it. I would, work all day, train at night, train anytime I could outside of the office. And then at some point I realized my job, I hated it. I want to travel, picked up and moved to Thailand. Yeah, so I was
Oh,
living
wow.
in Thailand for about a year. I trained with a guy named Adam Kayoum. He's like an old school Carlson or Laborio black belt. Works with AK.
Ricardo Laborio.
He's real involved with One now. I think he just moved to Singapore. But amazing guy. Taught me a lot about just like I realize every coach that I've had has taught me a lot about life and jiu-jitsu. So one of the benefits of not staying with one gym, but being able to learn from a lot of different people. From Thailand, I moved to New York, and I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist and like work with fighters and stuff. So I was going to school, working in a physical therapy office, and started training at Henzo's. I knew of John Danaher, but not really. But when I went there, it was like 2017, 16, 17. And I was there for 2 years, and that's where, I'd go to his class every single day. He was in the blue basement every day, and really he changed, how I approach jiu-jitsu. It was an amazing experience. And then from there, I moved back to Monterey.
Wait, why? I mean, I'm a New Yorker, so it's hard to always.
Trying to figure out life. There's some family stuff going on back home, and it was a really tough decision because I wanted to just train jiu-jitsu, but I didn't know how to make a living in New York. Like, didn't have much money. Realized I didn't want to be a physical therapist, and living in Manhattan, I just didn't really know how to make it work.
It's so funny. Right before this conversation, I was on an executive meeting for one of my businesses, and we were talking about this exact same thing. And I'm trying to do a bunch of business down in Florida right now, but I'm a New Yorker.
Yep.
And I was saying, like, the Florida attitude, they couldn't survive in New York because getting people to pick up phone calls, answer emails, show up for meetings. If you don't do that in New York, you would die because there's no room for error. There's just no room. You have to, every single cent has to be scraped together to live. And so just like the mentality of living in New York and staying in New York is kind of like you just have to have really tight jujitsu. There's just no room for error.
100%. And looking back on it, I don't regret anything. Like, life is what it is, and you learn and you move on, and your experiences make you who you are today. But part of me wishes I would have figured out a way to stay there. Obviously, those guys ended up moving to Puerto Rico, so maybe I probably would have moved out there with them. But yeah, I mean, I lived in a closet in West Harlem, like on 145th, and which was fine because it just incentivized me to just never be home. Just always, I was out all the time, which was nice. I got to really experience New York, but yeah, just at the time mentally, I didn't know how to make it work. And so, I ended up moving back to Monterey, my hometown. And, this is where I met a good friend of mine and my coach, who ended up being my coach. His name's Mark Gutierrez. He has a gym in Monterey. It's called Elite Team Monterey. And it was just it was cool because I had a nice impact on him, bringing Danaher's philosophies. And, he was really open to it because after training with John, it's tough to go to another gym and learn different jiu-jitsu. Like, anybody that experiences that, it's really tough. So Mark was really loved John's stuff, was really open to his techniques, and so started implementing a lot of that into our training. And at the time, if you take any of John's classes, you realize it's very, very difficult to remember all the little details. And you also start to understand those little details are very important. So I used to, after every class, I would take notes. And, at first I would remember, 10% of what he said. But eventually I started being able to remember everything. So I'd take his class, go shower, hop on the subway, and I'd be able to just write down everything in my phone. So I leave there a year and a half, 2 years later with pages and pages of notes. Looking back on it now, it's like, shit, now he comes out with all these instructionals. I'm like, damn it. all this time and effort. You know, I thought I was cold. But it really helped me like just remember and absorb his style and details. And so I got to use that and just in general now, like that's how I go about my jiu-jitsu. But
yeah, I often tell people when you write it down, it's like you're programming it into your brain.
Mhm.
You know, it's like a second way of reinforcing it.
yeah, definitely. And it helped me be able to start teaching it as well. Just 'cause you just remember, it really is embedded in you. And my coach, Mark in Monterey, it was a significant relationship because he started teaching me about online marketing. And so when the pandemic happened and gyms started closing down, you know, even before that, I was doing a lot of solo drills. If I got hurt or whatever, I got injured a lot throughout my jiu-jitsu journey, just from previous sports stuff and whatever. So I'd always do like solo movements to stay engaged. But when COVID hit, gyms were closed. I could still go into the gym by myself and just do workouts, right? Just to stay engaged. And that's where I started, you know, posting them online just to see if it would help anybody else out. And that's kind of how what now is called Jiu Jitsu Flo became. You know, it's still evolving, obviously. Like I'm still trying to figure out what this is. But yeah, that's when I started posting these movements and workouts and started getting good feedback. So just kept doing it.
Yeah, I've got it pulled up here for those that are listening in. Those that are watching in can see my screen, but Ari's page is at Jiu Jitsu Flo, FLO, and he's got a really great following and a very active page. One of my absolute favorite jiu-jitsu pages. And
Thank you.
some is technical, you know, like basic fundamental techniques, but done. And I guess now that I understand your journey and also your background in gymnastics, I think that there's a lot of precision in your movement, and you're definitely making the fundamental techniques maybe you're demonstrating them very correctly. Maybe that's what I want to say. You know, they're movements that we all see, but I think what you do so precise is demonstrate exactly how they should be. So there's one right here I've got pulled up on my screen, and I'll just kind of like talk everybody else through it. But here you are demonstrating. I'll put it on mute. A solo drill for entering into X guard from the K guard, and then you demonstrate it with a partner and how that technique works. And simple, but super, super effective. And it might not be a solo drill that most people that they would try.
Right.
And done so many of your drills, and they're just great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And this is I'm glad you clicked on this video because that's my oldest brother right there.
No way.
Who, after 10 years of training, I finally got him to get into the gym and try it out. So,
all right. Shout out Zach Goldman, Realtor.
Yes, sir. Looking for property on the Monterey Peninsula. Give him a shout out.
That's awesome. He lives down by you?
No, he lives in Monterey.
Oh, Monterey.
He lives in Monterey, yeah. So after COVID, I moved down or right around COVID, I moved down to Costa Mesa, where I am now. But yeah, the Jiu Jitsu Flo stuff, it was movements that I like to do. Like they benefited myself just to help with mobility and stay engaged. Like if I'm injured, I still want to go to class, be around everybody, learn technique, and like muscle memory, like combining the two, the mental and the physical aspect, really helps me like ingrain the concepts. So I would be doing little solo drills on the side or whatever, and then
So when I started doing jiu-jitsu in 2009. I trained under Sensei Nardu Debra. He's a black belt under John Danaher and Henzo Gracie.
Nice.
And he is just a magician, a tactician of jiu-jitsu and all martial arts. And when we started in 2009, he had recently opened his academy a few months before, I think in 08. And we were all white belts. The whole student, nobody knew how to do any jiu-jitsu. And so we did so much of this, so many times we line everybody up or get in two lines, and we would just work on rolls or we would work on egg beaters, and we'd work, and you know, the things that are kind of now are warm up that usually maybe 2 or 3 minutes long.
Right.
But so much of when I started jiu-jitsu was the kind of stuff that you're showing, not as advanced and not nearly as many. There certainly was no X guard from K guard, but just the basics.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's another reason why it resonates with me. And then one of the black belts, but we were at one time white belts. Professor Akbar Muhammad, he had a class at our dojo called Skills and Drills. And it was basically a whole class of just this, you know, just what you teach, which is so awesome.
Yeah. And that's so you think about other martial arts, right? Boxing, you know, the different karates, they all have this solo aspect of the martial art, right?
Kata.
Exactly. Kata and like karate, boxing, shadow boxing, right? Shadow boxing, pad work. Like there's different I'm blanking on the right word, but different ways to train other than just live training to help complement that live training. And so that you see, like what I'm doing, it's nothing new. I'm just trying to take it to another level and really break down movements from like every single position within jiu-jitsu, all the standing movements, all the ground movements, and figure out ways to help with the coordination for people that train jiu-jitsu, help be able to start connecting movements together. But also, like just like my bigger vision is to be able to help people that don't train jiu-jitsu get them involved in jiu-jitsu, because, you know, a little biased, but I truly believe if everybody in the world is training jiu-jitsu, it's going to be a much better place, right? So, you know, how can I get my brothers, friends, soccer moms, older, you know, 75 plus year old kids, how do we get people into jiu-jitsu? And I'm hoping that this will be one way to do that. You know, before COVID hit, I was doing Jiu Jitsu Flo classes at a local sports center.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's basically I treat it as like a yoga flow class, right? Except it's Jiu Jitsu Flow, and it's all Jiu Jitsu movements, and it was working well. Like people would try a new class, they saw on the schedules a new, you know, mobility class or whatever, they would try it. I'm talking about jiu-jitsu, how it applies to live training in this class. And then eventually people started asking me more about it, and they would go end up taking a jiu-jitsu class. And I was like, yes, that's it works.
It works great. And it's like an entryway and a less intimidating way to get into jiu-jitsu for sure.
Yeah.
You see these classes from time to time around. And, you know, even back in the day, they had like Gymnastica Natural in Brazil, which was, Animal Flow. And I think like there's that school, I don't know where it is, but Budokan. It's not my Budokan, but there's another Budokan. And the guy teaches it. What's his name? Cameron something?
Is he works with Rafael Lovato? I think I've seen them.
I think, yes, exactly.
Videos together.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, similar kind of taking the movements of jiu-jitsu and teaching like kind of like a yoga class. So that's great. But you said something that we can't glance over without exploring a little, and it's something that my sensei Nardu says all the time, that martial arts could save the world. And you know, you think everyone should take it. I think so too. But like, what are some of the universal truths that you found that helps people become better people by, you know, getting this into their lives?
So like higher level, you know, there's a lot of the things that I've benefited from, you can find in other places. I just think it's different with jiu-jitsu. So, you know, community aspect, problem solving, you know, the self-confidence that it gives you, the humility that it provides you. I think it just, simply put, for me, like it sounds cliche, but it really has made me a better version of myself. My ego, like, puts my ego in check. When I go out, I don't feel like I have to prove anything to anybody because I'm getting my ass kicked every day in the gym, right? It gives you like a self-confidence that I'd never felt before. Like playing other sports, I was confident, but jiu-jitsu just gave me a more, just a calmer self-confidence about myself, and just a little different. So I think those are the main things in the community. Like I've traveled to different countries, and no matter where I go, whether I speak the language or not, it's like we can find a way to relate through jiu-jitsu in its own language.
That's absolutely one of my favorite parts about it too. I mean, I've been at the same academy since I started, but because of my job, I've had to travel all over the world and all over this country. When I started my career in 2008, and I would go to some remote places in Texas, like for example, Brownsville, Texas. I do a lot of business and all the way on the border. And there was like one jiu-jitsu place. Now there's like a dozen jiu-jitsu places. Everywhere I go now, there's jiu-jitsu. And I would always bring my gi, my belt, my rash guard, and I would just drop in, just, hey, I'm here to train. And I knock on wood when I say this, but I have never had a bad experience in 14 years of traveling all over the world. And I have trained in Greece and Paris and St. Bart's and Mexico and 20 states. And everywhere I go, it's like, hey, what's up? Let's train. And I get those same butterflies every time I walk into a gym. Like, oh God, are they going to try to kill me? And sometimes they do. But afterwards, we're all hugging and hanging out. And it's like, I feel like I have all these friends, and a lot of them follow this podcast, and like we stay in touch. And sometimes it's just a little comment or just a little, hey, how's it going? But it's just so cool to be able to have those experiences. And like you said, my wife runs marathons. So last year she ran Paris and Berlin. And when she would go, I would go out for like a little tune-up run. I would go and just stop into an academy. Mm-hmm. I went to Paris. They did not speak any English. Like the class was in French. They really did not speak. The guys there did not speak English, but we spoke jiu-jitsu. And we became fast friends. It was so cool. It was so cool.
Yeah, really cool. My girlfriend, she last year she moved to Peru for a few months to learn Spanish, and she trains jiu-jitsu, and it was that exact same experience. Like she was able to go to a gym. Her Spanish wasn't great at the time. They only spoke Spanish. They got along. She has friends, that she's made that would go back whenever we want. And it's a universal language. Yeah,
it's a universal language, but also lets you experience the world in such a different way than you would as like a tourist. So let's say you get to New York. It's like, okay, I'm going to get on the tour bus and see a Broadway show, and I'm going to go to a hotel. You have no idea how many people have told me that they've moved to New York and never actually met a New Yorker, which is surprising to me as a New Yorker because I know a million New Yorkers. But one of my good buddies was Australian, and he'd been living in New York for 5 years. He was a work colleague. This is in 2008. And he says to me, you're the first person I've met from New York. And I was like, that seems almost impossible for me to understand. But his whole world centered around expats and Australians and people. And he didn't do anything that got him ingrained in like kind of New York culture. And so the fact that you could go to Berlin as a visitor, and now all of a sudden I'm chilling with all Berliners, part of their normal life. And I've encountered that over and over and over again in countries and states all over the place, Boston and Florida, all over Florida. And I think that as you and I are just like discussing universal truths of jiu-jitsu, I don't know too many other things like that. You can't just go to a boxing gym.
Right.
You can, but it ain't going to be the same experience. So like, oh yeah. You want to come in? All right. Yeah. Get in the ring with our up and coming middleweight, Golden Gloves guy. They're going to beat the living daylights out of you, and they're not even going to give you a high five on the way out.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's an interesting point. It's like two things to that point. Like jiu-jitsu right now, you have access to training with like the top guys in the world, right? And just training in general, like you can have fun training with people no matter their skill level. Right. I could bring in my brother who's never trained before, and I can have fun training with him. Like we wrestle around, like, cause just, like throwing a punch might not be as instinctual as like wrestling. Right. It's kind of like, even if you don't know how to wrestle, you can still kind of grab on and roll around a little bit. And the other point of like the local feel, I kind of take this for granted, but like I'm looking at planning a trip to Italy at the end of the year, and looking at all these touristy things to do. But it's like I want to get that local feel. It's like I'll just go to a jiu-jitsu gym. Like it's easy. Yeah. I know I'll meet people, and like you take a step back and think about being able to do that. It's like amazing.
Yeah. In the summertime in Italy?
Yeah. Well,
okay. Italy was one of the places I had. So some culture, like the Italian culture, especially in the summer, I was like trying to get in touch with guys, and they were just like off doing whatever they do in Italy in the summer. So plan that one in advance. I haven't had any other issues in any other countries, but in Italy in the summer, they're like, I guess,
no class?
living the Dolce Vita.
Yeah, I'm looking at going in like end of September, October.
Yeah. We're about
still trying to plan it, but
still trying to figure it out.
I'll be in New York for a wedding, my cousin's wedding, and then we're like, oh, we'll be on the East Coast. I've never been to Europe, so like maybe hop across the ocean.
When you're in New York, do you think you'll stop by the academy?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, because training. I mean, Henzo's it's such an amazing school. I don't know who teaches there now, but when I was there, it's like if you're not going to John's class, you're going to Neiman, Gregor, Igor was there. Like they have so many high level guys. I know some of them opened up their own gyms now and they're moving around.
Yeah, I think Mike Jarmello is one of the head guys there. I've taken a class of his on a few occasions. Nice. Going back to John for a second, I mean, one of the incredible things about John, and I had a chance to talk to him about it on this podcast, is that he is the most clear and effective communicator that I have ever encountered as a teacher.
Unbelievable.
Like when he speaks, every word is there with intention to communicate something that is important for you to understand. And he said on this, he's like, language is a human superpower. And, I don't think that he gets enough credit for just how good of an actual teacher he is. Like forget about jiu-jitsu teacher. Like he's just an incredibly impressive communicator. And, sometimes that's lost on people who don't connect with him because he sounds like like Yoda or whatever. But when I've taken his jiu-jitsu classes over the years, it is like, I don't even know how to explain it for someone who hasn't done it. It is a religious experience.
Yeah, it's one thing. It's why I say it, or one of the reasons why it's helped me become a better teacher myself. There's no wasted words when he's speaking, right, in a class setting. It's like it's incredible.
Yeah. And like, I love, like, he's so diligent with like what he's going to do. It's so clear that he's thought about what he's going to be teaching and he knows how he's going to be teaching it. And he's working towards like an end goal. And sometimes techniques can be too short. I've been to academies like, okay, we do the arm bar, throw the legs up like this, do this. Okay, let's roll, And then I've been to other classes where it's like a 30-minute lecture on a technique. And it's like, are we going to actually practice this thing? But John, it's almost like magic. It's like the perfect cadence, the perfect length, the perfect time. And then he's watching, and he's a deeply, deeply impressive person and had such a huge impact on my life. Even though we've only met just a few times. I've only trained with him, a handful of times.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. So I think another, something that got me into jiu-jitsu was watching Hickson's, documentary Choke on YouTube back in the day.
Yeah, I've seen you do the breath work.
Yeah, so I learned that training with Crone, we would breathe after training most nights. And so like that, like my ideal jiu-jitsu in my mind is a combination of Hickson and John. And they're so different. Yet like beautiful in different ways. Like with learning from Crone, it's like so this is the breathing, just like the diaphragm breathing that we would do after.
I have it pulled up on the video for those of you who are listening, and you can Google Hickson Gracie breath work and the movie Choke. He does it on the beach. Ari's doing it here.
Yeah, and this has had probably one of the most influential skills for my life, because learning how to breathe from Crone, it works well in jiu-jitsu, but like this is a skill set I've been able to use with everything in life, right? Because it just helps with managing emotions and energy. And so obviously outside of the gym, we still got to deal with that stuff in the work setting. If we're going to a meeting or we're having a conversation with somebody, it's like, if you can control your breath and use that to your advantage, it's so valuable. And
I'm happy you brought Chrome back up because you mentioned it before, and I wanted to talk a little bit about it. Number one, he has an upcoming fight in the UFC. He hasn't fought in 3 years.
Yeah.
I love watching him fight in the UFC. I of course always think back to his fight with Gary Tonin at ADCC when he won, and nobody knew who Gary Tonin was unless you lived on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And Crone was like, "Who is this guy?" Crone ended up winning. But just talk about somebody with such impressive jiu-jitsu, and such an impressive martial arts. What's it like to train with him?
It was incredible. It's like he really lives like jiu-jitsu lifestyle and like warrior lifestyle. And it like not as many words are spoken, right? Not like going over these detailed techniques. It's more like you gotta like show a technique, but you have to train a lot. You have to like get the feel of it, like the movements of it. And it was just, I don't know how else to explain it. It was like just more of a lifestyle.
It sounds like what you're talking about, his father talks about a lot, and his father also has a hard time articulating it, but he calls it invisible jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's how it's
the jiu-jitsu that you can't see, but that you can feel.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's why in my head, seeing that and then seeing John and how he teaches and how his athletes train, it's like, man, the combination of that is like, for me, the pinnacle. I'll never reach that, but it's like being able to combine those two is what I think about all the time. And yeah, it's interesting because with Hickson and Crone, I said like it's hard to articulate a lot of it, but when you feel it, you know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
I used to watch Crone, like big guys, big name guys, like much bigger than him would come into the gym, and I'm like, ooh, this is going to be interesting. And he just like would just run through him, and he would train with us, and it was mainly gi. We would do no gi maybe once a week, but it was predominantly gi classes. And he would always like tie one arm in his belt and just like, different methods of training. Cause he didn't have that many, like he would have people come in, but like on a day-to-day basis, like he would train with like the core group of guys at the gym, just like, random students that maybe weren't doing it full time or whatever.
Yeah.
And so he was always looking for ways to enhance his training and like the sensories. And so it was so impressive to see how he would train. And I mean, he's not a big guy, but like his movements, his, efficiency is beautiful.
Yeah, I've been fascinated by him. I can only imagine what it's like to grow up with a father like Rickson Gracie, is widely recognized as being one of the best fighters of all time, always in the conversation as one of the best mixed martial artists and best jiu-jitsu. And it seems like if, Crone has, in my mind at least, absolutely proven himself in his own person. His jiu-jitsu is incredible. He at the ADCC in the UFC, like he has carried that flag very, very proudly. And I know he had a difficult life growing up, losing his brother and a lot of hard times through high school. And so it's amazing to see the discipline and the turnaround.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Are you now doing jiu-jitsu full time, and is Jiu-Jitsu Flo, is it able to supplement you? I see that you have, and I can share my screen right here because I think everybody should pick up a copy, and I'll link to everything. You have BJJ Fanatics videos that are up right now. You've got Jiu-Jitsu Flo on here.
Yeah. So,
and you have a few other courses.
Yeah. So I got so this is the first year, like I'm trying to do Jiu-Jitsu Flo full time. And really dive into jiu-jitsu and all aspects. And I hadn't done it full time up until this point. I was always working and, figuring out ways that I could live a jiu-jitsu lifestyle and support myself, right? I live in Southern California, Orange County. It's not the cheapest place in the world. So it's tough to do. I'm not a world-class athlete, right? I didn't start training until I was 25. And so it's like trying to get creative and see. So for me, it's not about like how many accomplishments can I get for myself. It's more about like how many people can I help through jiu-jitsu. And so I have some instructionals on BJJ Fanatics. And I also recently, at the beginning of the year, I created my own platform. If you go to jujitsuflo.com.
Yep, I got it pulled up over here. Let me pull. Okay, so here is your website, Jiu Jitsu Flo. And in addition to having courses on BJJ Fanatics, and I also saw that you have videos on Jiu Jitsu X, which is I think is Keenan Cornelius's platform.
Yeah.
You have your own web business and your own video content library.
Yeah, so I did I did an instruction on Jiu Jitsu X like a year and a half ago. Did a couple on BJJ Fanatics this past year. And then the beginning of this year in January, I just created my own course and put it. So it's at jujitsuflo.com. And here I'm the goal is I'm just trying to build a community. And so I'll have more instructionals here as well as different services that I'm working out, trying to figure out how to basically make this like a full-blown business and be able to down the road maybe get Jiu Jitsu Flo accredited so other people can teach it, so then they'll be able to teach it to people in their local area, and then just help it grow, and hopefully that'll help people within jiu-jitsu, right, be able to maximize their training. That's like my first goal, but then also, like we were talking about before, like figure out ways to get the average person who doesn't care, at least they don't think they care about self-defense or actual jiu-jitsu training, but let them learn about the benefits of jiu-jitsu movements. And if they only like that, great, but if they want to eventually try an actual jiu-jitsu class, it's better.
Yeah, I connect with you so much on this, and it has never once occurred to me. My wife is 100 pounds soaking wet. She's a marathon runner. She's a surgeon, so her hands are her most important asset. But last night she says to me, "I want to learn how to defend myself," and just like think about her snapping like a twig in jiu-jitsu. She's so delicate, tough but delicate. And this would be the perfect thing for her to do. We have a whole new dojo in my basement. Like this would be the perfect thing to introduce to people who are interested in jiu-jitsu but intimidated by the physicality of it.
Yeah, and it'll give them, number one, it'll help them learn some movements. So that they'll learn movements within jiu-jitsu. They'll learn the names of positions, of techniques. So then, great, if they want to keep doing it at their house or maybe in a class, like just a Jiu Jitsu Flo class, beautiful. But if they ever do build up their confidence, which I hope that they would, to then try a class, they're going to go into that very first class with a ton of knowledge already, and they won't feel so out of place, when they take that class. Like my oldest brother, who just was on the video, who just started a few weeks ago, like he's a super athletic guy, like big guy. He's like 6 foot 220, whatever, athletic guy. But he walks into a jiu-jitsu class, he doesn't know anything. So he feels super out of place. Like he feels bad training. He doesn't want to be a nuisance on anybody else. And so he's trying to like pick up so much, but obviously it's overwhelming. But if he would have started doing like my Jiu Jitsu Flo videos a couple months in advance, I think it would have been super beneficial. And he's doing them now, and he finds it beneficial. So, it's another benefit to it.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. And to have even like a little small curriculum for your first 3 months, and it's like, you're just learning the foundations of here's the name of the basic positions. Here's what we're going to learn over the next year. You're going to have a stand up. You're going to have side control. You're on the top. You're on the bottom. I mean, there's definitely always a better way to do things. And
Of course.
I think, like you mentioned, you might not be training Gordon Ryan, but you could, for the average doctor or nurse or school teacher, to introduce them to the sport a little bit better.
Yeah.
I think could be really cool.
Even the higher level guys, I get a lot of black belts that reach out to me
Oh yeah.
and comment on the benefits that it's provided them. Because another thing that I'd love to be able to do at some point is provide warm-ups, like movements that gyms can use for warm-ups and cool downs, because you walk into a gym, there's going to be a different warm-up for every gym you walk into. Some are amazing, some aren't great, some, whatever. There's just such a spectrum. But if you can have movements catered to jiu-jitsu, or the techniques that you're showing that day, to help people with the warm-up and coordination, that's something I'd really like to be able to do in the future. And we don't have that much time. Like a lot of people, if you're not a pro athlete, you're working all day. Even if you're a black belt, you get off work, you go to class, you don't have much time to warm up. And in class, you're drilling, a movement for 5 minutes, you get 10, 15 reps in maybe, and you move on. You don't really have much time to really focus on the mobility aspect, because to help with injury prevention and et cetera.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, you said it. I mean, amongst your followers, I've just scrolling them on here. You have some of the top names in the world in mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu, ADCC champions, some of the biggest accounts. There's my one of my professors, Professor Akbar, who I mentioned, Drills and Skills. You got Navy SEALs, JP Dinnell. I mean, you've got some of the best guys in the world. Oliver Taza, and there's Michael Zania from BJJ Fanatics. You got the whole crew following along on your journey. You are on to something.
I got to be looking at that more often. I don't know what you were just looking at, but I got to tap into that.
I was looking at our mutual followers of professional people that are following along the Jiu Jitsu Flo journey, and you're doing something here that's, while it's fundamental, you've gotten the attention of like I said, some of the top names in the sport. It's really cool. I just, like I said right from the beginning, I love what you're doing. The first time I saw your account, I was like, wow, this guy's just awesome. He's such a good demonstrator of the fundamentals, and I love the fundamentals.
Thank you.
I also wanted, before I, as we wrap up over here, I want to make sure that everybody can find your courses. So we got your website. We saw BJJ Fanatics. What's the best way to connect with you, for people? Is it your website?
The website's like strictly if you want the program right now. I haven't built it out too much. So
I saw you also got some merch over here.
Yeah, I got some shirts. I'm going to be doing some collabs and having some new, again, I'm kind of figuring this all out on my own. So, there's a lot of improvements to be made. But I got a couple shirts right now. I'll probably be partnering with Jiu-Jitsu in the near future to make some new and improved gear. But yeah, the instructional Jiu-Jitsu Flo or BJJ Fanatics. And then to get in contact with me, I would say just message me on Instagram. That's probably the best one.
Cool.
Yeah. That's
great. Well, I encourage you, if you or anybody listening has any questions, if I could be helpful to you in starting your business for whatever it is, whether it's in e-commerce or starting up the classes. I teach a program called Mix You to my fashion business. I have 15 brick and mortar retail locations, and my e-commerce website, shopmixology.com. We have 350 employees, and I do, this is going to be my third year doing it, but I have a leadership academy called Mix You. I do an 8-week program in the summer. My first year, I had 140 students. Last year, I had 240 students. And this year, we're shooting for more. Shout out to Henny, one of my team members who's listening in on this podcast right now and taking notes. She's running the whole Mix You program this summer, and she has been a past participant in Mix You. So we know a lot about doing these online classes. We've learned a lot of really good lessons. And I've carried a lot of jiu-jitsu lessons over into the program as well. So if I can be helpful to you or anyone else, you let me know.
100%. I appreciate it. Would love to continue chatting.
Yeah, always here, anytime. Ari, what a pleasure it is to have you on. Good luck with everything. I hope that this can, help a little bit and spread the word on Jiu Jitsu Flo.
My man, fellow member of the tribe. I appreciate you, Jordan. Really,
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the opportunity and the kind words and everything, and love what you're doing with. I didn't know you had so much going on, but just your channel, I follow it for a while, and you're doing a lot of good things. So I really am honored to be, to have this opportunity and to be on the podcast. So thank you.
Yeah. I really do appreciate you. All of you've said some kind words over the past year or so since we got connected on Instagram, and that's like the power of social media for good, and for all of its bad parts, to be able to connect like-minded people from across the country. It's a cool thing, and so I really do appreciate all the kind words and support that you've given me too. Have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Jordan, take care.